and the desolate wastelands of Mesopotamia, Crassus, once the wealthiest of Romans, was broken by his own greed. Consumed by his obsession with gold, he knelt before the Parthians, who, in cruel irony, poured molten gold into his throat. In the heart of the Roman Empire, amidst Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul and Pompey's expansion east, one man's hunger for power would carve a dark and tragic path. Marcus Licinius Crassus, born into wealth and ambition, sought more than gold. He craved glory, but his insatiable greed would lead him down a horrifying road. As his empire of riches grew, so did his obsession with military fame. His destiny, however, would not be crowned with triumph, but with an ironic and cruel death, one that would echo through history, leaving a legacy stained by the very gold he lusted for. From a young age, Marcus Licinius Crassus showed an unnatural talent for business, driven by an insatiable thirst for wealth. While his peers dreamed of military glory, Crassus waged a different kind of war, the war for power, gold, and influence. The streets of Rome, bustling with ambition and the stench of power, whispered tales of his ruthless cunning. Crassus' moment of reckoning arrived during Sulla's prescriptions, a time of bloodshed and treachery. As the Roman dictator published lists of those who would lose their assets, Crassus saw not tragedy, but opportunity. He bought up properties from the doomed at laughably low prices, exploiting the desperation of those whose lives hung by a thread. Vast estates, worth fortunes, fell into his hands for mere scraps. The city trembled, but Crassus only saw the glint of gold. His most infamous creation was a noble fire brigade, a clever, sinister business disguised as charity. In a city of wooden structures, where fire was a constant threat, Crassus assembled a group of 500 slaves to battle the flames. But instead of extinguishing the fire, his men arrived with an offer to purchase the burning property for a pittance. If the owner accepted, they would save the structure. If not, they would watch as it burned to the ground. In the chaos of the fire, Crassus gained even more, feeding off the fear of others. Within years, Crassus owned a significant portion of Rome. His fortune, a staggering 100 million sesterces, would make him one of the wealthiest men in history. Yet, despite his vast wealth, he was plagued by something far more powerful than money: envy. While he amassed gold, his rivals Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar earned military glory. Crassus had helped quell Spartacus' revolt, yet he remained without the triumphs that marked his rivals' names in history. This gnawing dissatisfaction corroded him, the rust of unfulfilled desires eating away at his soul. As age crept upon him, Crassus found no peace. At 60, when most men seek comfort, he instead marched toward his doom, determined to conquer Parthia and claim military glory. But it was not gold he truly sought, it was immortality. His ambition would soon lead him down a path of unimaginable darkness, where the price of glory would be paid in blood, fire, and ultimately, a fate so cruel that it would be whispered in the shadows of Rome for centuries. Driven by a thirst for power, Marcus Licinius Crassus set his sights on the Parthian Empire, a realm that controlled lands now known as Iran and Iraq. Famed for their wealth and terrifying mounted warriors, the Parthians were a force to be reckoned with. Their cataphracts, heavily armored horsemen, and skilled archers struck fear into their enemies, shooting arrows while galloping away. For Crassus, the Parthians represented more than just riches. They offered military glory that could rival the legacies of Caesar and Pompey. The tales of Parthian gold, so abundant that their cities shimmered under the sun, fed his obsession, urging him eastward. In 53 BCE, ignoring warnings and omens, Crassus led an army of 40,000 men towards the unknown. A storm destroyed the bridge over the Euphrates River, killing many soldiers. Yet Crassus pressed on, undeterred by the foreboding signs. His arrogance blinded him, and he chose to ignore the curses invoked during the departure ritual. The air was thick with misfortune, and yet he marched on, driven by the promise of wealth and glory. Little did he know, his ambition would soon lead him to a fate darker than any he could have imagined, a tragic and inevitable end. As Crassus and his legions marched into the heart of Parthian territory, a dark shadow loomed over them. His arrogance, unchecked and festering, led him to reject crucial alliances that could have saved his doomed campaign. His officers, seasoned and wise, warned him of the coming storm, but Crassus, intoxicated by the thought of glory and gold, ignored their counsel. His son, Publius, a gifted commander who had once served under Caesar, tried desperately to rein in his father's reckless ambitions, but to no avail. Meanwhile, the Parthians, led by the brilliant general Serena, watched and waited. Serena was a master strategist, young yet formidable, with an army of his own 1,000 heavily armored soldiers, 10,000 mounted archers, and a caravan of camels, carrying not just provisions, but the weight of an impending doom. His forces were vast, and his tactics deadly. The fate of these two great men would collide on the plains of Carrhae, a place that would forever stain history. The Roman legions, moving under the harsh Mesopotamian sun, felt the heat of disaster closing in. Crassus' scouts warned him of the Parthian approach, but his impatience overpowered his reason. Ignoring sound military advice, he pressed on, eager for the glory that was slipping further from his grasp. The Parthian mounted archers unleashed their deadly barrage of arrows, retreating swiftly before the Romans could strike back. The disciplined Roman formations, once so proud, crumbled in the open terrain, their armor proving useless against the rain of arrows. Desperation swept through the Roman ranks as Crassus' son, Publius, led a futile cavalry charge against the archers. His move, so filled with hope, would be his last. Surrounded and trapped, Publius fought valiantly, but as the battle turned to despair, he begged his shield-bearer to end his life rather than be captured. The Parthians, merciless, decapitated him and displayed his severed head as a grim trophy. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. One subscribe from you will be a huge encouragement for us to grow the channel and create even better content in the future. A heartfelt thank you to my dear friends for quietly watching my videos. When Crassus received the news of his son's death, it was a blow that shattered his soul. His wealth, once all-consuming, now seemed like dust in the wind. His army was in disarray, surrounded by the unstoppable Parthian force, with no other option. Crassus sought to parley with Serena. What transpired next in the desolate wastelands of Mesopotamia would become a legend so dark that it echoed through the centuries, forever etched in the annals of history. The Parthians, knowing full well Crassus's insatiable obsession with gold, chose to impart one final, horrifying lesson. The whispers of ancient Roman historians, Diocletian and Plutarch, speak of a gruesome fate awaiting the mighty man whose entire life had been consumed by the thirst for riches. As Crassus knelt, broken and defeated, the Parthians, in an act of cruel irony, poured molten gold down his throat, the liquid metal flowing into his mouth, a burning mockery of everything he had ever desired. "You have thirsted for gold, now drink gold," they proclaimed, a chilling sentence, reverberating through the ruins of his ambition. The image of a man once invincible in wealth, now consumed by the very metal he had hoarded, was one that would haunt Rome for generations. This grotesque act, if it indeed happened, became a powerful symbol of the consequences of hubris, an eternal reminder of the price of unchecked greed. It was said to be a form of divine retribution, a punishment fitting for a man whose every waking thought had been consumed by the accumulation of wealth. The Roman people, who saw in such tragedies a moral lesson, could not escape the bitter irony of it all. Yet, even as this gruesome death entered legend, a dark cloud of doubt began to form around its truth. Did it truly happen, or was it a later invention? A poetic embellishment meant to serve as a perfect ending to Crassus's life, crafted by those who wrote the story in the centuries that followed. The historical truth, as it often does with ancient events, remained unclear. Plutarch, who wrote his account almost 2 centuries after the death of Crassus, had never been an eyewitness to the events. Neither had Diocletian, who recorded his version even later. They were separated from the facts by time, distance, and the growing legend of Crassus's demise. They, too, were entranced by the story, willing to accept it, as many Romans did, because it fit perfectly with the nature of Crassus, himself a man who had wanted everything but lost it all. But even beyond these 2 accounts, similar tales of cruel deaths at the hands of molten gold appeared throughout history. It was said that Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, had executed the ruler of Lydia, King Crassus, in a similar fashion, melting gold down his throat as punishment for his wealth. These stories appeared in various cultures, from the east to the west, as recurring motifs in the folklore of powerful men brought low by their greed. Was the tale of Crassus's death simply another such myth, woven from the same dark cloth as other legendary endings? Historians, looking through the lens of time, began to suspect that perhaps it was. Instead, many now believe that Crassus was simply killed during the negotiations with General Serena, his body cut down and beheaded as per the Parthian custom for important enemies. His severed head, a grim trophy, was likely sent to the Parthian king Orodes II, who, according to some sources, was watching a play by Euripides when the messenger arrived, bringing with it the head of Rome's wealthiest man. The molten gold story, it seems, may have been invented by later generations who sought a more poetic, more fitting end for a man who had sought the impossible immortality through wealth. But if the molten gold story is indeed apocryphal, why does it persist? Why does it remain so deeply embedded in the collective consciousness of the Romans, and later, the world? Perhaps because it provided the perfect narrative conclusion to Crassus's life. The Romans, a people who adored symmetry in their tragedies, saw in this death a fitting parable about the dangers of excessive greed, the very thing that Crassus had coveted. Above all else, the one thing that had driven him to sacrifice everything became his undoing. The consequences of Crassus's ill-fated campaign against the Parthians were far-reaching, both in life and in death. The Roman Empire lost roughly 20,000 men killed in battle, and another 10,000 were captured, to be resettled by the Parthians on their eastern frontier. The legionary eagles, those sacred symbols of Roman power, were seized by the Parthians, a humiliation so deep it would haunt Rome for decades, until Augustus finally negotiated their return. Politically, Crassus's death removed the third pillar of the first triumvirate. Without Crassus to mediate between Caesar and Pompey, the stage was set for a deadly civil war that would forever change the face of the Roman Republic. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I will discuss this case with you in more detail. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. As for the Parthians, their victory at Carrhae would earn them a reputation for invincibility, one that would last for centuries. No Roman general would ever achieve a decisive victory against them, until Trajan's campaigns nearly 170 years later. Crassus's story remains a powerful reflection on ambition, hubris, and the limits of money's power. He had everything wealth could buy, but in the end, he died seeking something gold could never provide: immortal glory. Ironically, Crassus achieved immortality not as a conqueror, but as an eternal symbol of the dangers of limitless greed. Whether his death by molten gold is true or not, the legend continues to serve as a warning. The insatiable quest for more, always more, will ultimately lead to ruin. In ancient Rome, it was said that every man had his price. Crassus, who knew the price of everything, discovered too late the value of things money cannot buy: wisdom, moderation, and, in the end, a death with dignity. Crassus's tragic end serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and greed. His insatiable thirst for wealth blinded him to the more valuable things in life: wisdom, relationships, and dignity. In the pursuit of riches, he lost sight of what truly matters, leading to a fate more devastating than any loss of gold. His story teaches us that wealth alone does not bring fulfillment or legacy. It is the choices we make, the respect we earn, and the lives we touch that define us. Let Crassus's downfall be a lesson. True wealth lies in balance, not excess.